Blizzplanet. I'm here with Rob with the Classic Games team. Rob, why don't you tell me a little about what you do in your role on the Classic Games team?
Sure, yeah. As executive producer, ultimately the responsibilities are to align all of the different functions involved in helping to bring Warcraft III Reforged to the world, but certainly overseeing very actively the development, as well as a lot of the business operations and so forth.
How long have you been on the Classic Games team, and how long have you been at Blizzard in general?
Yeah, I started Blizzard in '95, so I've been there a few days. And started the Classic Games team with about a little less than a dozen folks. We did that 2 or 3 years ago, and it really was, it spawned from some of my earlier days running Battlenet. And, you know, a little bit of the origin story behind even Classic was the idea of helping to bring these great games that otherwise weren't readily available on the modern Battlenet launcher. You know, again, up to the masses. So
awesome. All right. Well, so with the remastering of Warcraft 3, do you think there's any possibility we'll see any new story content or DLC for Warcraft 3 in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. So our primary focus right now, obviously, is like just getting the game in a great state. Like, there's so much work involved in terms of like taking the original engine and upgrading it so that you get all these amazing new visuals, integrating with the modern Battlenet stack, and then, you know, making sure that a lot of these custom maps that are out there continue to just magically function. And just doing that is its own sort of bag of chips, if you will. So the notion of really pushing on like brand new content, it's not something we're really digging into, but we are taking some liberties in the way in which the existing campaign works, as well as the units that are available. So, for example, we're adding a different variety. Like with Warcraft 3 originally, when you would build certain units, there was basically one stock asset, and that was it. So what we're doing is we're adding in again additional varieties of those units so that your Death Knights don't just look like Arthas. They actually have their own sort of unique flavor.
So there was a lot of units like that in Warcraft 3 where the portraits were just kind of generic. So are all those generic portraits going to be updated to be unique, or at least the majority of them?
Yeah, like the goal is to try and get all of them. You know, I don't want to say we're going to be 100%, but let's get as close to like 99.9% as we can.
So talk to me a little bit about the engine. Is it a complete rewrite? Is it a revamp? Or, you know, what's going on with that?
Yeah, so the engine itself is actually the original Warcraft 3 engine that we've evolved on the graphics side, as well as like added in all of the modern trimming. So you get your widescreen support, you get the modern Battlenet functionality and networking capabilities of today. And we kind of had to do that, right? Because we recognize that with the millions and tens of millions even of players that continue to engage with Warcraft 3 and the custom mod community that's there today, if we start from a brand new engine, we're going to break all of that existing functionality. And we didn't want to do that. We wanted to make sure we carried that forward. So by starting from that place of known good, and then, you know, kind of evolving that, we felt like we could actually then catch any potential challenges right along the way of development.
Will you be able to switch between the old Warcraft 3 graphics and the Reforged graphics just like you can in StarCraft?
It may not be exactly the same as StarCraft. This is something that I'm particularly passionate about with the team. With StarCraft, we had this really cool like magic technology of F5 where you basically could just hit the button and instantly it would flip. But because of the nature of how the engine's constructed, it's a 3D engine versus a sprite-based engine. Just, you know, hitting F5 and having it instantly flip, there's memory constraints and bandwidth and so forth that you have to worry about. But the intent is that the original version, the original graphics will be there, and then the new graphics will be there, and you will be able to switch between them. It may not be instant, but that functionality will be there. Nice.
When people are, you know, making custom games or maps, are you going to be able to use any old models as well, or is it just strictly new models?
I'm sorry, could you
basically, can you use old and new models when you're making a custom map, or is it strictly when it's
you know, that's actually something we're still kind of toying around with. So there's this sort of a unique thing to Warcraft 3 where the community has the ability to really get into the under the hood and sub out some of the models with their own. And so we know with those sort of unique variants, we're not going to be able to just magically up-res those, as it were. But the stock assets themselves, if you have a custom map, if you load it up inside of Reforged, it'll all get the sort of the beauty treatment. What we haven't really landed on is there a world where we want to have the sort of SD and the HD, as it were, or the SD and the HD variants actually working together? Technically, it's totally feasible. In fact, like as we're doing the development, whatever assets are not currently up-resed, they actually default back down to their SD components.
Oh, nice.
And you see that even with like certain effects and what have you that we haven't fully treated yet, and they just work side by side with the HD assets.
Awesome. What about unit pathfinding and AI? Has that been improved or changed at all?
Unit pathfinding AI and every one of these RTSs is a little bit of that secret science where we go, you know what? We want to tread cautiously on any of the changes that we look to make. With StarCraft Remastered, we basically treated that as a big old no black box, like don't even touch it. With Warcraft 3, we haven't made any explicit decisions to go in and actively tackle like unit pathfinding. But I think it's an area that we'd be open to exploring because we are going to be investing time and energy into like really pushing on the balance of the game and doing more to like just kind of tighten up the competitive edge between it. And if the pathfinding becomes an issue, or if the AI is something that we want to beef up to get a better training ground for folks, then that might be an area that we toy with.
What about bug fixes? Like the existing bugs that are there? I know there were some that, units would just come on screen randomly or things like that. So how are you guys tackling bug fixes for this?
Yeah, there's definitely a desire to identify what are actual bugs as opposed to features, and stomp out those. This is something where, again, with a very active dialogue with our player community, is super important to us. Like, we want to make sure that we start from this place of, hey, this has been a game that's been live for 15, 16 years. We don't want to make any assumptions about like, hey, this is something that is part of the meta, is part of the way in which people are engaging with the game. So as we make those changes and putting them up on PTR and having folks test them out, we want to get that feedback so that we are sure that we didn't actually fundamentally break Warcraft 3.
That's good. I'm sure everybody's happy with that. Can you talk to me a little bit about some of the hardware limitations that you had with Warcraft 3 and how those are being removed or just making it easier on a modern system?
Do you mean hardware limitations from like way back in the day?
Yes.
Yeah, so Warcraft 3 was our first 3D game. And it was also at a time where folks were like just compute power in general, GPU power, like very different space. And so memory was an issue, overall processing speed was an issue. Like everything was a lot slower. Yeah. And in fact, back in the day, I mean, even Warcraft 3, like it was using some of the more cutting edge machines because we were trying to push as much as we possibly could. So today, we actually are in a very different world, obviously. And so we're able to go and create shaders and do, kind of the modern implementation of the graphics backend. And on top of that, we're able to do more with the engine. So we mentioned it yesterday during a panel, but it's sort of an interesting, fun discovery for us. Jay knew about it. Jay Patel is our lead graphics engineer. The drawing of Warcraft 3 on screen, if you know how the original game had the HUD at the bottom and the strip at the top, those were static images. And then underneath them, it was fully black. And then the viewport that you would actually see is the portion that we would actually draw to the screen. And that partially was because of, again, the compute power from back in the day. So when we started to go down this path of like, hey, could we rejigger the interface a little bit, maybe open it up so that you can see more of the playing field, it turned out that, well, we opened it up and it was just a bunch of like black screen. So that, the team was able to, make it so that it could render full screen. And so those are actually like some cool side effects, because for that mod making community, now we're in a position where if they want to go and actually rip the interface out completely and have a full screen view, and then drop in certain components, they're able to do that without the game taking a hit.
So does that mean the UI is going to be moddable as well with maps, or is it just strictly pulling it out?
It's a great suggestion. It's definitely something we want to talk about. Right now, we're just just experimenting with, okay, what improvements could we make onto the UI? But we've learned a lot as Blizzard over the years with respect to UI and modability of UI. And it's certainly something that with, again, that custom map making community, I think there's an area to explore on it. I think it's something that we're going to continue to talk about. I don't know whether or not it's something that'll make like a day one, if you will, but it is an area of interest to many of us on the team.
Awesome. So I know Blizzard's been doing a lot more with console games lately, Diablo 3 coming to Switch and stuff. Is there any thought of maybe classic games coming to any consoles at all?
Always thoughts, but never, not something that is like top of mind at the moment.
That's fair. That's fair. Talk to me a little bit about the map editor. Like Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2's map editors were, drastically different. StarCraft 3's was a lot, or StarCraft 2 was a lot more advanced than Warcraft 3. Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about the map editor in Reforged and, taking lessons learned from StarCraft. Is it just like Warcraft 3? Yeah.
So, the thing about the map editor, and I'm sure a lot of the viewers know this, this is fundamentally like how we build the campaign missions and all the maps and so forth, and we're able to like kind of pull off some really great things. But the community has really ratcheted up kind of their involvement with creating those maps. And so we've got about 15 or 16 years of a wish list that has come out of the community for things that we could add into the original Warcraft 3 map editor. The idea being, again, starting from the original Warcraft 3 engine, starting from the original Warcraft 3 map editor, we can bring all that stuff in and start like introducing those new modifications with the learnings of what we took from StarCraft 2's map editor as well. And one of the things we saw in terms of differences, like Warcraft 3's map editor was fairly easy to get into. StarCraft 2's was definitely more like a kind of a version 2, a lot more complexity. You can do a ton with the Galaxy editor. But the Warcraft 3 editor, again, was something folks could kind of step into pretty straightforward. We were able actually to identify a number of folks from the mod making community, and we just said, you know what, we're just going to hire you and have you work on this, which was a bit of an interesting exercise because we're like, hey, we think you're pretty cool and you're doing some great stuff and we'd like to hire you, but we can't tell you what we're going to hire you to have you work on. You're going to have to take a big old leap of faith. And they did, and it's worked out great.
That's awesome. What's the scripting language for the map editor? Is it the same? I believe the old one was JAS. Yeah.
Still JAS. But we are talking about ways in which we can level that up as well. I don't want to get too much into the specifics because candidly, I'm not that guy, but sure. But there is going to be more that we'll talk about in the coming months around how we're evolving map editor.
I'm assuming that people that are making maps can use, custom characters like Naga that you couldn't normally play as and make their own kind of custom games with those, right? To play as like a Naga?
You're gonna be able to have as many unique experiences as your crafty mind is able to create in the editor.
What about custom spells and things like that?
I have seen some amazing custom maps coming from all parts of the world. Okay. I don't want to rule anything out. Again, I come back to the ingenuity of the creators that are out there. We're going to be starting from a place that people understand. We're not looking to fundamentally upturn the apple cart, so to speak. So a lot of the tricks that people are able to use today, they'll be able to continue to use. Part of our responsibility, part of our pact with that community is, again, we don't want to break the game. And to us, an integral part of the game is that custom mod making community.
And you did say that you're trying to make all the old maps work. You can't test them all, but the idea is that a good percentage of those should just load up?
Yeah, and we're basically doing that right now where we can go get the maps, load them up, and effectively, again, if they're using those stock assets, if people haven't been too ingenious and subbed out a bunch of assets and done a bunch of crazy stuff, it does largely just work. To your point, though, we aren't able to go, there's, who knows, 50,000, 100,000 maps. I couldn't even count how many maps there are. Right. We can't go and actively test each one. But what we do want is we want to be in a place where people are able to load them up, and then we give them the tool set that we're evolving, that we're making, that we're using to enhance the game, so that if they want to right side those particular maps, they're able to do so.
How are custom maps going to be hosted? I think in the past it was more peer-to-peer, right? Is there going to be more of like a client server-based thing with that, or have you guys not figured that out yet?
I'm just going to say we haven't really figured it out yet. We do have, we've been talking about a handful of different solutions, but that's something where now that now that the word is out that we're doing this, we actually want to engage more with the custom community to make sure that we're putting in the right tools for them to be able to create great experiences.
I know old maps were limited to 8 megabytes. I assume that's going to be lifted with this, or are you guys going to try to limit it again?
I don't know whether or not we actually already addressed that, but I know that that's come up before. We've been going for the past couple of years to various map maker summits and communities around the world and engaging directly with the map makers. We added in recently like 24-player support on maps. So there's a handful of improvements that we are making. So those are examples of, like, as the months come along and we talk more about what are the specific enhancements, we'll be able to get into those details.
So obviously Warcraft 3 was using the old Battlenet, right? Are old Battlenet accounts basically going to be dead from Warcraft 3? Are there going to be a way to merge them or convert them or anything? Or what's the plan for that?
Yeah, so we learned a lot from StarCraft Remastered in terms of the building the connective tissue between the classic Battlenet and the modern Battlenet, as it were. And the idea is with StarCraft, you were able to actually like link your profile together. We want to do a similar thing with Warcraft 3, where we're able to conjoin the two because we recognize that we have people that, again, have 15, 16 years of history with this game. They've got their record, they've got their profile. They don't want to lose that. We don't want them to lose that. And we learned that lesson from really when we started the modern Battlenet, that if you break the old, you effectively are creating two separate communities. And we don't like that. We want one community. We want one world where players are coming to play Blizzard games.
So I think the original Warcraft 3 is no longer on sale. So is that basically done? Like, you're not gonna be able to purchase that anymore? And is there any intent of having the original Warcraft 3 be in Battlenet, or is basically Reforged just gonna take its place and that's what's there now?
Yeah, so Warcraft 3 Reforged will include the Reign of Chaos as well as Frozen Throne packaged all together, and like we talked about, it's also going to include the original version of the game. Effectively, you'll be able to play into that as well as Reforged. That's going to be the main path for folks to be playing.
Any chances that we're going to see an alpha or beta sometime this year or anything, or do you guys even plan on doing that, or is it just going to be kind of like a launch for it?
We have a really cool demo that's available to play here today at Blizzcon. We're in November, so I'd say the chances of like an alpha or a beta coming this year is pretty slim, but I'm looking forward to next year.
What about skin options, right? I know that you can buy I forget the name of the
Spoils of War.
The Spoils of War edition. You're gonna get some skin options. Are there gonna be others outside of that in the future, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's because the game is 3D based. It does give us some additional options that, with StarCraft Remastered, we had this. It was this kind of, I don't want to say it's a problem, but we would basically have to make all the models in 3D. And if we wanted to do any sort of variants or whatever, we'd have to make them in 3D and then split them out into 2D in all the different angles and variations. So the effort that went into actually just doing anything, it was almost like we were doing twice the amount of work. With Warcraft 3, we basically get to do half the work that we were doing on StarCraft. So it does open the door for us to start exploring things like additional skins and variants and so forth on units. But like I mentioned, out of the gate, we are planning to have more variety on different unit types, just so that everything isn't just the same unit. And how far we go down that path is a little bit of a TBD.
So obviously the culling map, that you guys have kind of revamped Stratholme to be more like its WoW counterpart. Are there plans to, do other maps to make them more familiar to what people had seen in World of Warcraft, or anything you can talk about on that?
Yeah, so definitely with all the history that World of Warcraft has built and the lore associated with it, one of the things that we do want is to draw, again, that connective tissue between the entire franchise of Warcraft, so that you have that sort of emotional connection to what you know. And then equally for us, we have an opportunity to go back and look at some of these levels and say, hey, you know what, we actually, maybe we could tweak this over here because we didn't like how it actually how it came about, and we've learned a lot about map level design and so forth. So there are going to be additional opportunities. Don't want to get into exactly which ones, sure, but definitely.
Is the Classic Games team that's working on Reforged the same that did StarCraft, or is Reforged a separate team as well?
A lot of the members that worked on StarCraft Remastered are working on Warcraft III Reforged. We still have folks working on StarCraft Remastered. So it's definitely a team effort. And we like to share back and forth whenever possible.
But this is a totally separate team than the StarCraft II RTS team as well, right?
Correct.
Okay. Cool. Well, that's all the questions I have. So I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, cool, man.